dancing. Stop dancing.
What?
You've only got 30 seconds.
You stop the music.
Not a dance party. None of this will translate to the audio version, so I'll have to cut it out. Good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Coast EVs, your fortnightly post-Thanksgiving week fast charge on electric vehicles and infrastructure. As always, I'm joined by my fellow co-hosts down in the southeast, which is getting cold, he says, Mr. Walter Schultze of the Network Architect channel, and over on the west coast, which does get snow, contrary to popular belief, Mr. Eric Way of the News Coolum channel.
Yeah, got video proof.
Yeah, you've got the road trips going on right now, so we're very lucky to have those. I know people are eager and ready to see them, so show us the snow. Let's see. So all the usual housekeeping. We have next day audio, usually by lunchtime Eastern, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, et al. And then you can check out where we are and what we're doing. I think there's only one more show left in the year, but you can go to plugandplayev.com, Coast to Coast EV's show, and that's where the replays, all the past versions, and everything else we have will be there. So check that out if you want to see what we're up to. We'll jump straight into the news. I think today we have some interesting stuff later on level 2 charging, but we'll start up with what caught my eye, with the Rivian Adventure Network opening up. Not quite on full yet, but we have the opening of the Joshua Tree outpost, charging outpost, one of those fun kind of Rivian branded hut adventure kind of spaces that also includes a bunch of amenities, but that will probably this weekend be the launch of the opening of the Rivian Adventure Network, which at current count has 92, I guess, with Joshua Tree charging locations across 30 plus states, I think it was. So interesting place. It's something we've been talking about all year, and they only really had a few more weeks left to go with that to open up. So I was waiting and watching, and we knew it would happen, but I'm pretty happy with it. It's something we've talked about, being in interesting locations, national parks, state parks, scenic drives, all that good stuff. Eric, it's out your way that this will all begin. So what are you thinking about the location and the network as a whole?
Well, I mean, they kind of snuck right in under the end of the year mark, didn't they? Joshua Tree is... well, I mean, it's Southern California. How necessary it is, I don't know if I can speak to that. But the one good thing is, just as a whole, the Rivian Adventure Network tends to put their chargers in locations that not a whole lot of other people cover. In fact, for a long time, it was basically Tesla and Rivian were the only ones really covering that Highway 395 up to Mammoth Lakes for a while. And then, of course, we've seen them put in their chargers at other kind of iconic off-road or adventure-y places. So they definitely have some good locations. And then I still do get the sense that at least the initial build out of their network was to sort of get in where we can fit in terms of, one of them's at a Safeway, one of them's at El Pollo Loco, right? Like, so there's still a lot of variety to the type of stop that you're getting when you go there. It's more about where that greater geolocation is. Joshua Tree is not exactly a site that I would go. Like, I would basically be going out of my way to use that one, in the sense that I'd have to probably be going to Joshua Tree, where I'm really hoping that they have a chance to open some of their chargers that are a little bit better situated. And then I have not been able to find anything locally, but in Northern California, just off of I-5, there's a town, Orland, and Rivian was supposedly, working with the town of Orland to put in a charger, a 12-stall charging hub just off of I-5 in Northern California, with at least half of the stalls open to non-Rivians. So with this news, maybe that can move forward, and maybe it's just 12 stalls open to everybody. So I'm looking forward to it. I've long said that I think of the private networks, I was actually more interested in Rivian opening their sites than Tesla. and maybe that's just greedy because, like you said, most of them seem to be in California, but they also seem to be in locations where I would be interested in using them. So, and their pricing seems pretty decent. But other than, I think you had mentioned that the one in Joshua Tree might be 60 cents per kilowatt hour for non-Rivian.
Yeah, it may be a little inflated just because of the California prices in general.
Yeah.
It looked to be about a 33% premium over their regular prices, which everything I've seen everywhere else has been 36 cents to 40 cents per kilowatt hour for Rivian drivers. But
Yeah.
about a fifth of the stations are over in your neck of the woods. So, I mean, even if it is above, it's still going to be within market rate there, I would suspect.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I said I'm kind of in that California mode where someone's like, it's 55 cents per kilowatt hour. And I'm like, deal. And they're like, no, that's too much. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so and Walter, I know there are some down in your neck of the woods as well, right? It's a network that maybe you haven't, tracked quite as closely as some of the others, but I'm sure it's something you've stumbled across and maybe have an interest in.
So very close to my house is called the North Lake Mall, and they installed one there. And I remember going to it and looking at those beautiful brand new chargers as a wayward outsider, not having any way of connecting them to my car or trying them out or anything, which is a kind of strange location. They also opened one up last week at a mall outside of Portland, which, for their branding seems to be uncharacteristic, but I'm sure there's method to the madness of what they're thinking. The one in North Lake Mall outside of Charlotte is outside of an REI. So I think they're co-locating with the outdoor brand in major metropolitan areas in order to kind of distinguish themselves that way. And but it is in a good location in a heavily used area. And it's immediately adjacent to a Tesla supercharger that just got a bunch of V4 dispensers extended to a V3 station. So a lot of chargers in that section of the parking lot of the North Lake Mall. So kind of interesting as far as that goes, how much power is actually flowing through the streets there. And as you say, there's other ones in North Carolina that are at select locations. Boone, North Carolina is in what's known as the Highlands region, where the Blue Ridge Parkway intersects with the southern portion of the border of Virginia, which is home to Appalachian State University. And they were one of the few games in town, but again, it was closed. So that being open for the folks in Boone and who are traveling to points beyond or coming down the Blue Ridge Parkway and need a charging station would definitely be helpful. And lastly, the most traveled national park in the national park system is here in North Carolina and Tennessee, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And just outside is the Cherokee Nation. And they have a station in Cherokee, North Carolina as well. So those three, the Charlotte, the Boone, and the Cherokee over here are all very well received, and people were very happy to see them, at least the Rivian owners. And I think a couple high-end YouTubers swung by the Cherokee one and were singing its praise because it's close to the tail of the dragon, which people like to do road trips to.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the key, isn't it? It's more about location than actual, the coverage and quantity of them. I know Tesla owners that I've spoken to have been pretty nonplussed about why this is a big deal, but I think those of us who watch the wider kind of non-Tesla charging space are pretty interested in it for that reason. But not fully open yet, so we won't dwell on it too long. I want to make sure we hit the other topic that you had brought up, Walter, with EV execs in and out. Actually, I think I did the one with Tritium, where ex-FreeWire CEO Arkady Sosunov resurfaced this week after a period of being quiet. That's one that we'll probably have Eric speak to because he's got some budding theories about potential curses that anyone using those FreeWire and all the tritium chargers may have with Alpatronic. But Walter, you had mentioned also Carlos Tavares out at Stellantis. Just want to cover that really quickly whilst we have some time here.
Thank you for pronouncing it. I always have a difficult time with his name. And although he seemed to be in control of the company, the numbers weren't supporting that narrative. And eventually, you either have to change the red ink to black ink or change leadership. And that seems to be what abruptly happened. And they're talking about him quitting in anger or something along those lines over the holiday weekend. But truth is that they were heading in the wrong direction anyway. My personal opinion is there's the shakeup as a result of not moving into the electric vehicle space like the other two Detroit 2.5s have already done, without any really compelling offers, except for a few what I'd call compliance cars coming over from Europe, just to kind of show that they're doing something, but really nothing in the Dodge. You know, the Dodge Challenger is kind of like a halo promise, but right now we haven't really seen one rolling down the streets yet. It's just been, theoretical and concept. So I think that eventually ate away, because in the case of General Motors, when you look at all they're doing, and they are having problems with numbers out of China as of this week, General Motors domestically is doing quite well. But I think if you look at the numbers, that's mostly due to the increased sales of electric cars. If you take the electric cars out of their portfolio, GM is not really doing that well, and they'd probably be in the same boat. And absent a similar type of strategy, Stellantis just was seeing erosion.
So, yeah, I was just going to say with that, because now, were you talking about the Ram Charger, Walter, or just the Charger Halo car there?
The Dodge Charger is supposed to be coming with an electric, and I think it's 2027. Correct me if I'm wrong. And the Ram Charger is the extended, is the range extended pickup.
Yeah. So okay, right. you were talking about those two. Yeah. So and that's what I had always wondered about too, because you knew that GM was heading down the path of producing a full-size electric vehicle because of what they were doing with their supply chains and their battery production. Dodge, to my knowledge, and Stellantis, to my knowledge, weren't doing anywhere near that much work. And you just aren't going to be able to build full-size EV trucks in any numbers that matter if you're throwing a 220, 230, 240 kilowatt hour battery pack into them. And that's why I always wondered how much of this was just mostly marketing and saying, hey, look, we've got our toe in the water. We're coming soon. Right. Versus, to your point, how much of it is actual action on the EV front. And that was what I always found so so confusing about Stellantis. So.
Yeah, I mean, and on the other side, I mean, this is happening a lot because obviously the EV space is dynamic, and some companies rise up, others ebb away. Tritium is kind of resurgent, which is good news, given that they are, the foundation of some networks and have, as Eric found recently, BP Pulse is using them a good number of places. I know EVCS was one of their customers. They've installed NEVI chargers over in Hawaii. Not the biggest, state, obviously, but kind of important presence across the country and in different areas. Any thoughts on how the FreeWire and Tritium side kind of intersect, and whether that will be good news for Tritium, or what are we thinking there?
You want my opinion? That was another one that I just don't know how to parse, right? Because I saw all of this demand, and maybe, again, this is maybe a California thing, but we saw nothing but FreeWire chargers going in location after location after location, and then same with Tritium too. And ChargeNet was another one that they were basically, from the looks of their design, they were all in on using Tritium. Tritium, built a factory in North America. They're looking to ramp up production, and demand just didn't look like the issue to me. So I don't know, in terms of internals, what's going on with these two companies that would make them fail. Because with FreeWire and Tritium, I would say that there were some issues with their reliability a little bit, and that could basically shine a light maybe on some internal problems that they were having with quality control, parts replacements, things like that, cost overruns. But the combining of the two, or at least Arcady going over to Tritium, at this point, I just don't know what to expect, because I see so many of their units in the ground. I see and even the ones that are unreliable, quote unquote. I've seen posts on PlugShare where it's not that the FreeWire unit isn't working, it's that the credit card reader is down, or the connection for the billing for the credit card reader is down. So you can use it, but only if you have the BP Pulse app, right? So your payment options are now limited. So the charger still technically functions. And then, of course, like I said, the thing with FreeWire and Tritium is, it wasn't like BP Pulse was their only customer. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like I'm going to be kind of curious to see too what it takes to market these, because I think that strategy that FreeWire had under Arcady of that grid tie battery, reducing the installation time, reducing the installation costs. And the way the Tritium chargers, to my understanding, work is, unlike some of the other chargers, they actually do work at the dispenser level at a DC, right? So that actually seems to pair very well with this concept of having on-site batteries and inverters from the grid. So it seems like a natural match. It's just such a such a weird way for it to happen.
Right, it's coming out of failure, but has every potential for success.
Yeah, I guess what we're gonna wait and see is it two wrongs make a right? Like I don't know. Is it two failures make a success? And I mean, I hope so. And like I said, I know from what I saw of ChargeNet and their plans, they literally had dozens and dozens, if not over 100 sites planned. And each of these we're looking at it, 6 stall or 6 at least dispenser count sites. If they had the funding that they claim they have the plans that they claim they have, and they were working with Tritium, they alone could keep Tritium busy for another year or two. And they were doing on-site battery, they were doing on-site solar. That partnership, I would be interested to see if that's preserved. And maybe I just need to follow up and see if I can get in contact with someone at ChargeNet and see, who their hardware provider of choice is moving forward, because that could also be an avenue for Tritium to get jump started again.
For sure. No, it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. Definitely wasn't expecting that one, so good bit of news to have there. But moving from mostly DC fast chargers, as we obsess over, and I want to bring up our guest here for the evening so that we can get him in on some of the questions before we introduce everybody. So welcome to Joseph Nagel of Pando Electric. Good evening, and I hope you can hear us okay.
I can hear you great. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. And actually, good
Wonderful.
evening. Not correct, is it? You're in, is it Los Angeles?
I'm in Los Angeles right now, yes.
So you're in good afternoon territory with Eric.
Well, I think the sun is already down, right? So
yeah.
Yeah. So we'll do introductions a little bit first, because I think what people would like to know what Joseph's working with here and what Pando Electric's all about. Then I'll jump to the comments, because I think there's questions that may be beneficial for your expertise, Joseph. So let us know who you are and what Pando Electric is working on.
So I'm the head of corporate strategy at Pando Electric. I've actually been in the EV charging space for over a decade. I started out with a company called EverCharge. I also helped found another company called Orange Charger. And so here I am at Pando Electric. We make EV charging outlets that are specifically designed for multifamily facilities like apartments and condos. The reason we went with a charging outlet over a traditional charging system is actually quite simple. It really boils down to costs. Your upfront costs are cut between 50 and 70%, depending on the property. And then your ongoing costs are dropped to about zero because you don't really need to maintain an outlet. I ask people all the time, how often do you maintain your outlets in your house? Answer is probably never. And it's pretty much the same situation with our outlets. And so we also build in a lot of adaptive load management systems, really stretch out the building infrastructure. So basically, what we're trying to do is just work with the power that exists within the property and not try to bring in anything more, do anything special, and really just try to bring a solid, convenient charging experience to people who live in multifamily homes.
Awesome. Thanks for the rundown. You can see these units kind of in my background here, so that's one way. But you can. I also want to call out the video that you did with Patrick and Liv from the Marquee vlog, which I'll link in the description after here. Great video, kind of gives you a really good rundown on a lot of the stuff we'll dive deeper in tonight. But nice perspective as well from the residential side, and actually the people who kind of helped make it happen, as well as the Pando electric side of things. So definitely worth watching that for a closer look at what's going on with that. I want to, before we delve into the world of multifamily dwellings and level 2 charging, go through everybody's comments there, just to let me know where they are and what they're driving, and probably have a question for the rest of you here from Mike in SoCal. But first of all, hello to John Cape. Thanks for joining us. Get down, Eric. I presume that means dancing, not get off the screen. A positive, supportive comment. Welcome, Jay Donaldson. Bill B down in Tampa in an Audi Q8 e-tron. More references to the music and Eric's use of it. I'm sure you can find some cats on the ranch there if you try. Crazy Postman over in Oklahoma, the land of 50 kilowatt chargers.
Yeah, it's a really funny identity crisis charger that he came across that was a Blink Francis Hyundai charger. It was it was kind of cute.
Happy day. I need to go back and look. Francis is engaged in so many 200 plus kilowatt chargers near me or on my route that the land of 50 kilowatt chargers is.
Yeah, and it was being billed as 120 kilowatt, and he kind of did a caper and proved that it was only 50.
Fun. John Baker over in the UK, thank you so much for joining us. I hope we can keep you awake at least for a little bit here, but not a solution necessarily that will beat you yet, but hopefully at some point very soon. Closer to Joseph and Eric in Bakersfield, California. Paul, thank you for joining us. Ye Old Traveler in Ann Arbor, Michigan, did a road trip to Colorado in Mustang Mach-E Rally. Excellent for Thanksgiving, as we say. So I haven't even touched on Thanksgiving travel here, but I'm sure we can get into that in the comments. Joshua Tree is close to Mike Mahan's parents over in Palm Desert. Hope you get a chance to check that one out, Mike, and send me some photos, please. Yoldy Traveler mentions on Rivian Adventure Network that they had to open up anyway because they have NEVI awards in Michigan, which is 100% true and may actually end up being one of the first sites over there. Scott Owens also happy about RAN, seems to cover a full drive on the Blue Ridge Parkway, which speaks to exactly what Walter was pointing out. Really good for accessing these scenic areas kind of in line with the Adventure Network. But on the other end, Crazy Postman points out, coming soon to a parking lot mall near you, but in the parking lot of an REI or a Whole Foods or something with granola, most likely. So I hope that is what you find. Let's see. Anybody else I missed? RLH Marines from Savannah, Georgia. Thank you for joining us. Big Barney over in Western New York. And I think we're pretty much hit everybody. If I've missed you, I'll catch you in a little bit here. But the question was from Mike down in SoCal. He would appreciate a recommendation for a new level 2 EVSE for his parents. That's in Palm Desert, as we pointed out. Buying them for Christmas, as the old cheap eBay one is now done. Kind of brings us into level 2 a little bit, but what can we, I don't know, what's everyone's quick recommendation on a favorite EV SE for home use?
Go ahead, Eric.
I'm still using the juice box I bought 8 years ago, so
that didn't go down in the taken down software.
I specifically did not get one with Wi-Fi connection.
Okay, you wanted it to be disconnected off-grid.
I wanted it to be as dumb as its owner.
Happy times. Walter, what do you use?
Well, I'd recommend anyone who's purchasing a level 2 charger for their home now to make it J3400. And there's one company that makes those in mass. I think we all know who they are. Okay, I'll say it, Tesla. Their universal connector works really well with the built-in adapter to the J7872. But anything J3400 is what I'd recommend because, 3 years, 5 years from now, that's what all the cars are going to be using.
Yeah, anything. I mean, there are plenty of dumb chargers out there. I always, for my purposes at least, love the J Plus booster just for the pigtails that you can use and plugging it in at campsites. That doesn't sound like something Mike's parents will need to do, but it's fairly simple. It has built-in load protection and it does the job for me. So that would probably be my choice. Not crazy expensive either, even though it's a pretty rock solid unit. It's very, very hard to break. Otherwise, stuff like what have we tested? EVco, Emporia. Trying to think of some others that we've had. Grizzly is always a good one, but they may be a little bit overkill if your parents just want to plug it in and forget about it. But on that subject, Joseph, that is your bread and butter day to day, right? This is the idea here of these beautiful devices next to my head is to create simplicity for residential areas, multifamily dwellings, areas that will probably have a lot of EVs looking to plug in, but to charge and to get that benefit of home EV charging that we're kind of stuck on. I mean, the context for this, as most of the viewers probably know, is that, between a quarter and a third of folks in the US live in some kind of situation where there's, inability to charge. Most likely they don't have a driveway, garage, it's not a single family home, whatever the living experience, they don't have somewhere they can put a home charger and get the benefits of waking up to that charge. So enter Pando Electric. What are the kind of, first off benefits in addition to the ones you talked about a little bit in the intro there? What are we looking at that's different from the kind of typical installations we're seeing at MFDs?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one is it is a plug, it is a socket-based system, which is more similar to like your Type 2 connectors that you find in Europe. The bigger difference there is that we're not using any sort of proprietary connection. We're using a NEMA 1450 socket. We went with that because it's more or less in the United States a very universal socket type. Most vehicles sold today come with a mobile charging adapter that can use that socket type. We know that no matter what happens with connectors, whether it's J72, 3400, some other new thing that hasn't been invented yet, it doesn't really matter because that mobile charging adapter will be able to go into a NEMA standard socket. That standard's been around for about 100 years, so it's not going anywhere. The other big thing that we have there is adaptive load management. That's how we're actually able to really stretch the building infrastructure, allowing more chargers to be installed on a single breaker. This particular install, we put about groups of 4 to 5 on single breakers. And so then they roll through each one, letting each vehicle charge up to its fullest and then move on to the next. And then the last thing is we built in, that's an actual commercial grade revenue meter as well. So it's been accurately tracked by CTEP. We have certifications from CDFA on that. We're the only socket-based system that does have that certification at this point. And that means that the people who live in that apartment, they'll know, they have the peace of mind knowing that because it's a revenue grade meter, it's actually accurately tracking the kilowatt hour down to the 4th decibel. So it's extremely accurate in terms of its accounting ability.
Eric, I think you probably, although you're now up in North California, you have the experience of living down in Los Angeles and I don't know if you had level 2 back in the day, but what kind of, where do you think this fits into the market and what questions did you have for Joseph?
Well, I mean, so I think one thing to call out is, the sort of intractable problem is not having designated off-street parking. So, and that is still a problem for a lot of people, but this solves that problem for all the multi-unit dwellings where you have designated off-street parking. And I would say, I mean, my questions, I know someone actually also posted it in the comments too, is there's been a lot of talk of 277 volt now. And then with the J3400 standard natively supporting it, is this something where you're taking these and splitting them off of a dedicated 480 transformer, or is this something where so that it's coming with those 277 volt feeds, or is this just the standard home 240 volt that's being shared?
So yeah, it can do the 277. That's still something we're testing out. So this particular install does not do that. However, that is something that we're actually actively working on and going to adopt very soon.
Okay. And then the other thing is, because I'm looking at the box, and are you accessing the data through an app then? So if I'm an apartment dweller and I'm on 1A, right behind Steve's head, so I just look at it and I can tell on that, based on through an app or a web portal, what my usage is and what my bill is.
That is correct. So these ones activate via QR code via our app. So you open your app, scan the QR code, put in your information on the first charge session. Every subsequent charge session, you just need to scan the code and then plug in. We're actually moving away from this. We're doing a tap and charge with all of our new units actually have an NFC reader in it. So we're actually able to do tap and charge, be able to support Apple Pay, and then soon credit card payment directly. So they could sign up, or if we wanted to put these in a place where it's just more public and you just walked up with your credit card, you could just tap it against there and start charging.
Okay. And then I guess I guess I'm also kind of picturing the philosophy behind it, because this is not necessarily then meant for assigned parking. So
quite right.
Yeah.
Quite right. So this can go into any kind of situation. Our backend software allows us to sort of configure this in any number of ways. I can lock this down to an individual system. So maybe one for Steve, one for Walter, one for Eric. Or I can say one for Steve, Walter, and Eric, or I can say one for just Steve and Walter. So I can mix and match however I like based on what the property needs.
Okay. So when your annoying neighbor invites their better half in and they plug in on your socket, they don't necessarily get to charge. Okay.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay.
And Walter, I know you would have pored over the tech specs and the various sides of load management. What kind of questions did you have for Joseph as you perused the materials?
Many. I don't want to suck the air out of the room, but one thing just to top off, where'd the name of the company come from?
Oh, wow. You have a great question. So Pando Electric's actually named after the Pando aspen. And the reason that we named it after that is that's the largest living organism on Earth. When you see the Pando, like a Pando forest, each one of those trees is actually all part of one single organism. And we see our charging system is the exact same way. While you see a lot of charging systems there, it's actually one system. So it's not many chargers. It's actually a single charger that's using all of the building energy to its maximum efficiency.
Got it. Okay, so it makes sense. So yeah, many questions, as Steve suggested. I'm the resident nerd here. And one of the things that I was thinking as I was going over, do you guys also include posts or just the unit itself?
We do. We have a standard dual port pedestal that we do sell as well.
The metal?
It is metal, yes.
Okay, so designed for durability, and because I'm thinking most multi-tenant dwellings don't have covered parking like what is pictured there and was in the Maki vlog interview. And I was just thinking, most of them are going to be wide open parking lots with, frost and whatnot. So I'm assuming they're environmentally hardened and able to be presented to basically any parking space configuration.
They are. So the pedestals themselves are solid steel, so they essentially can act as their own bollard. So if you ran into it, it'll break your car. It's not going to break the pedestal. Beyond that, we do have, all weather covers that we can put over the outlets. It's not necessary, but a lot of places do want to have that over there for the frost reason, to keep frost, from covering up that outlet. But they're all NEMA 4 rated, so they're ready to go.
And I think the answer is no, but I thought I'd ask it if I had the opportunity. Is there any benefit to a homeowner, just a consumer? There was talk about purchasing a charger, going with yours versus just having an electrician install a NEMA 1450 in a garage. I couldn't think of any benefit in that.
To the homeowner, no, there's not huge amounts of benefit. As we go into this new future of more EVs everywhere, the utilities are going to want to do more demand response. We actually just did a local calculation here for Los Angeles. There are 200,000 EVs in this area. That essentially equates to about 2 gigawatts of energy, if we're rounding up. That's a basic, nuclear reactor. So that's a lot of energy that's going around, that's being stored, can be moved around, can be stopped, started. So I would bet that in the near future, there's going to be more single family home solutions that are intelligent, at least to allow for some kind of either dial back the charging or shut it off completely. But no, broad strokes purposes, no, it's not really that useful for a single family home.
That's about what I was thinking. And I was also envisioning, as I said, the outdoor use, which is probably the most common use case, at least for a multi-tenant dwelling. And I was thinking if people are stringing cables from posts that have metal posts, isn't there like tripping hazards, or is there anything accounted for as far as the cable draping?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically, it's really up to the properties to determine whether or not it's a hazard. It's not really any different than when people just leave the cords dangling on the ground anyway.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, once it's plugged in, it is kind of a tripping hazard that still needs to be sussed out.
Yeah, maybe some kind of signage or something. I'm not sure. And probably up to the property owner to determine what would be best in each governing jurisdiction. And you've mentioned reliability, but how reliable are we talking about here? Because level 2 reliability is, my colleagues here will attest, has always been a challenge when you're going to a location that you're hoping to get a level 2 charge from. I basically keep my expectations low, so I'm never disappointed because more often than not, it's either occupied, iced, or not operational. So what have you guys seen for the reliability of the units that you guys have installed? I'm assuming there's some field testing that's occurred.
Yeah, 100%. And like one of the things that's really interesting about these covered parking garages is that they essentially turn into Faraday cages because it's a lot of concrete and steel. So signal doesn't get out very well, doesn't travel around in that situation very well. So it's a very difficult problem to overcome. We have solved that. Right now we have a 99%, greater than 99% successful charge rate. And the only reason it's not 100% is power goes out sometimes, so we can't really control that. The reason we're able to do that is we actually have our chargers build a localized network. So they're not relying on the cloud for anything. Everything's happening locally. All the load management calculations, all the billing and everything is happening locally. And then to get signal out, we're either using the user's phone or we're having one station have signal out if it can get it, and then route it through all the others. So the system really is fairly robust and it never goes down. So even if like the internet goes out in that area, the system will just continue to act as normal. As long as there's power, they will work.
Yeah, boy, I could definitely go deep on that one. I'm gonna resist the urge to talk about the mesh networking that you just brought up there. So out of the three that you mentioned, you said office, hotel, and apartments. In this phase of your guys's company's growth, which are you seeing like the most activity? And I have my thoughts on what that might be. Basically, captive fleets, I'm thinking, is where this will likely have a pretty good play in.
Yeah, right now, actually, our biggest is HOAs and condos. And that really just boils down to our ability to work within that specific niche really, really well. And so we are able, and because, we're able to actually give everybody a charger, that actually plays into something that's a little bit more intrinsic to them, which is value added to the property. So every 30 chargers that you add to your property equates to about $300,000 of additional value to the property. When you're talking to a bunch of HOA owners, that's money in their pocket essentially. And so it becomes almost a no-brainer for them to add charging stations because it adds value to the property. It makes it more attractive for rentals and on and on. The other side of that, when it comes to like an apartment complex, a lot of the property owners there see the same issue. So they want to bring these in to not only add renter convenience and potentially attract more renters, but also boost the value of the property.
And I'll ask one more question, and then I'll turn it back over. On that same thought, are you starting to see municipalities require chargers for new builds?
Yeah. Here in California, Cal Green building codes require 50% of all the parking spaces to have at least be EV ready. There's a wonky breakdown that I won't get into, but 50% in new builds. And I think in a lot of states that are following California's lead, they're at least getting it up to about 20%, which is great because if you do it early on, it's a lot cheaper than having to wait when you retrofit. It's a lot easier too.
Yeah, I do a weekly update on electric vehicle infrastructure, and it said, according to studies, that most of the charging is going to be needed in multi-tenant dwellings. So you're definitely in a terrific spot. The addressable market is going to be huge here.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive, and it's been one of those sectors of the market that has just been completely forgotten a little bit and ignored. I mean, even Tesla doesn't have a really strong solution for this particular niche. So we are working into sort of a kind of wide open market right now.
Very impressive.
Yeah, and I actually had a couple other follow-up questions that one of them maybe plays off of what Walter asked, and then another one that I've been wondering for a while and I should have asked initially. But the first is like, so one of the issues we ran into with HOAs is mandated insurance. And so one of my friends, she got an electric vehicle based on, my suggestion. She went to try to plug it into the 120 volt outlet in her condo garage. And then she was told that she needed to maintain $1 million of liability insurance if she wanted to plug in an electric car, even though her neighbor had like 2 refrigerators plugged into an outlet.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know if you've run into this sort of like insurance issue or mandated insurance, and is that easier for you as an entity to maybe bundle so that your customers don't really have to think about that or worry about that?
You nailed it. That's exactly what's going on. So we provide the insurance to the customer so that they don't have to deal with any of this. And it's a lot easier and cheaper for us to do it when we have, this huge market cap. So it's more like something for us, it's, pennies on the dollar, but for them, it's a significant cost.
Yeah. Okay, that's perfect. And then the other thing is for the public access posts, because this was always a concern. Southern California, this, or really any major city where you're going to have a lot of these apartment buildings. But if you're doing things like a public parking or public access, you're providing the NEMA 1450. But what about the actual EVSE? And the reason I ask is a lot of times, people can have them snatched, people can have them stolen. Are you making any sort of accommodations for maybe lock boxes, like a bicycle rack box or something like that, where people can put their EVSE in it, lock it away, and then that way they don't have to worry about it being stolen while they're, plugged in and shopping in the mall?
Yes. So we don't do public charging too much. We do have like some mixed use installs, and we do, in fact, that outdoor weather cover actually does have a locking mechanism on it, so that if you are charging, you can lock it and know that there's no way that someone's going to be able to steal it. They could cut it when it's have active energy. That would be fun to come back to, but otherwise, they're not getting that thing off.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I have marked a bunch of questions in the comments here, so I'll make sure we get to the crowd as well. Let me just say hello quickly to Wilson Leonardo from Pottsville, Pennsylvania, Shoykil, home of Yingling Beer, and a bunch of EVs in that. Check out whether the local Onvo near you has DC fast charging. I think they've got a NEVI award, so I want to know. So if you check in on PlugShare, let me know. And also hello to Mark Beringer, whose comment I've lost here, but up in Ontario. Thanks for joining us. No, there it is. There we go. Hello, Mark. Thanks for joining us. So let's see. Question from Jed Joseph. Do you recommend a specific amperage to set the car EVSE at if you're plugging in your own, or can the amps be set to whatever the car EVSE wants or the building can provide?
Yeah, so we want to make this as easy as possible. So it's whatever the car the EVSE wants. We don't want to force something onto somebody, and we certainly don't want to like have it not interact correctly with our system. So it's very basic. If it can accept the amperage, that's what we're doing. If it's lower, that's what we're doing. So it's basically all up to the EV driver.
Awesome. And then a little commentary on the apps side of things. Big Barney in New York does not like them. Crazy Postman in Oklahoma believes they're valuable and definitely staying around. The follow-up from Big Barney is the software open source, locked? What kind of software are you dealing with there when people download?
It's both. And that's the most unsatisfactory answer I know. So we have our own proprietary backend system that we manage and own and run. That's similar to, like, we see ourselves similar like an Apple. It's fully integrated into our system. It's how we're able to save so much money and operate at such a high level. But we also have adopted OCPP, and we want to make sure that, if the worst does happen to the company, like we realize that companies go out of business, things happen, maybe it changes hands. We want anybody to be able to come in and continue to use that charger as normal. We certainly don't want another G-Flock situation where it goes out of business and everybody's freaking out because that's their daily charger. So we have adopted that standard, and people can be rest assured that even if something happens to us, they'll still be able to use the charger.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Walter, you look like you're asking with a follow-up there.
Yeah. So you mentioned previously that there was an on-site device that was providing the ability, should the internet go out, for the load management to still function. So I'm assuming it's, a NUC or some kind of server compute form of some form or another.
No, so each one of the devices themselves acts as that.
Yeah. Clever.
So yeah, I can't get into too many specifics, but that's how we're getting around some of these things.
Understood.
Yeah.
And let's just say a landlord is seeing an initial investment slowly start to get utilized more heavily. Is there a way of adding additional circuitry or additional breaker panel circuits to, basically throw more logs on the fire sort of thing?
100%. So this system's designed to actually do daisy chaining. So what you're seeing there is a daisy chain system behind Steve there. So we're actually wiring up multiple chargers to a single breaker. We can break off up to 10 before we don't want to do that anymore, because it's basically going to ruin the power management, going to drop it to such a low level that it's not useful. But yeah, that's the easiest way for them to scale up without having to bring in, say, a new sub panel or anything like that. They can just daisy chain off the existing branch to add more chargers.
Right. So, and then you could add additional breaker panels into. So, let's just say I'm load balancing. I've got 10 outlets being fed from 100 amp circuit, and I know that's oversubscribed. But right now, there's only one person in my entire space that's actually using the thing. So for me, that's more than ample. And then 2 people start using it. So now I'm starting to be less oversubscribed, or I'm starting to be close to being oversubscribed. And then 3 people, and then you have to start doing the load management. Well, when you flash over and 12 people are using them, and there's only 10 spots, and all of them are in use all the time, then you want to throw some more amperages in there, so more of the outlets can be lit all the time. Am I understanding that correctly?
Essentially, yes. But a little bit of it is, there is also a little bit of a rudimentary thing there that people overestimate how much they'll charge. It's the same that they overestimate how much they drive. So typically people, they use their cars almost like they use their cell phones. They're waiting until it's about 30 to 20%, and then they're plugging it back in. And then, a lot of people who become savvy EV drivers know, like, I want to actually not get it all the way to full. I want to put it between 20 and 80%. So to get from 20 to 80% is only about 4 hours under our system, because that's a 10 kilowatt charger. So it's pushing out a lot of energy. So the idea behind our system is to get as much energy into those cars as fast as possible, to roll them off the system so that we can bring in more. Because it's using an adaptive load management system paired with like a first in, first out mechanism, so that people who are first in, they'll come in, we'll get them as charged as full as we can, and then drop them to get somebody else in.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Jumping to the comments again, Cecil asks, have you talked to states, electrical folks, or utilities who may have money to help pay for these? That's obviously jumping into incentives and that side of things. That must presumably be quite a big draw if you can help them pay as well as lower the costs long term.
Yeah, 100%. And that the install behind you again is that's was paid for mostly by Peninsula Clean Energy. They have one of the more forward-thinking incentive programs in the country. They have no cap on their level 1 or level 2 outlets. They're the only ones that are doing something like that. And because they're doing it like that, we're actually able to really spend that money extremely efficiently. That install cost each individual unit $400 a piece. That's it for a charger. The total number of chargers there is 92. So we're talking about like it's an easy choice for someone who's an HOA property to understand, like, okay, I'm only going to pay $400. I get this charging station. It makes my property much more attractive to any person in the future who might buy it, any renter that I might bring in, or I might buy an EV myself. So it makes the decision easy for them, and then it takes a lot of the burden of these really, really high costs off of people. And so what we're really trying to do now is reach out to more state electrical programs and get them to drop some of the requirements specifically around the connector type. Because a lot of incentive programs are still pushing a J1772, which is like A, becoming outdated fairly rapidly, and B, basically cuts out any socket-based system because it needs a connector type affixed to the charger, which causes a lot of issues.
There's so much to dive into. I mean, when we talk about the installs of the common kind of charge point or blink or whatever it is that we see, that you can easily run into 5 figures just to get a couple of ports in your lot there. But I mean, on the side of the cord, there's a few questions here related to that. When you're looking at the outlet side versus the kind of European style we have with the Manicas or the Type 2s, where you obviously, have that instead of an outlet, still an outlet, but something that, plugs into a cord you carry around in your car. What was the thinking in going with the NEMA 1450 versus the kind of style that we're seeing over with the BYOC in Europe?
Yeah, so it really boiled down to what we took a step back and looked at everything that was going on within the EV industry. So number one, we wanted to see, like, what equipment do EV drivers get when they buy the car? Well, they don't get this specialized cable. They get a cable that's more of it's a NEMA 1450 or it's a 520, commonly both, or if it's a Tesla, you can buy the whole pack of like every single connector type possible. So we wanted to match the system to what people were already getting and not have them have to buy yet another piece of specialized equipment. Beyond that, like if they move from, say, an apartment community to a single family home or a place that they have their own private garage, they can still use that NEMA style plug to go into like a dryer outlet or any other NEMA 1450 outlet. And because that standard has been around for over 100 years, it really just makes sense to continue to adopt that standard so that someone can buy a cable and then use it in multiple locations across the country, not just one place. You buy a cable when you're living in an apartment for a couple of years and then you move out and then you have this useless thing, in your car. And I think that really boils down to the last bit here is sustainability. We didn't want to have people buy a bunch of cables and then all of a sudden they can't use them anymore and then they're throwing them away. Like we're trying to like actively solve some of these problems and not create more waste. So that's another thing that we're just like weren't on board with.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point actually, because it's the NEMA 1450 part is the most common piece, right? You can talk about what's on the other end of the cable, whether it's J1772 moves to J3400, whatever you've got. Most people will have, except for myself with an old 30 amp socket, the NEMA 1450 that is, it's just ubiquitous. It's everywhere, whether you're moving from your garage or you want a second kind of, even if you've got something hardwired at home, maybe you have another place, maybe you have the apartments, maybe you have the need to go to your in-laws and charge on a NEMA 1450. That cable then is staying in your car, but to your point, it's the one that you've already got. Most people do have that 1450 equipped portable charge cable, and just having that go to a bunch of different cases, including the ones behind me, but then a bunch of other potential travel uses is a nice thing to kind of have in your front, back, false floor, whatever it is. So I mean that's definitely a big one. There's also a crazy postman's point here. He melted his NEMA 1450, which is interesting. But I think it gives you an opportunity to talk about the durability side and how well these things are going to last, which is another piece of the cost component, right?
Absolutely. So we didn't want something that was going to break ever, or at least not break within, a reasonable time frame. So we've tested this outlet for 15,000 cycles. So that's one cycle is a plug-in and an unplug. If you put that under like the normal usage, it'll last you about 40 years. That's because people are plugging in, every couple of days, not every single day. So you're looking at 20 to 40 years of just usage under the system that we have now. And we don't want that to ever change. We don't want somebody to, constantly be worried one of the connectors is going to wear down. It's going to be a while. And so that's kind of the point. We wanted this to be the last charger that these buildings have to buy.
I've not given Eric much of a chance to speak here, so I want to give you some before I make sure I cover the final questions from the crowd.
Yeah, and this was more just about Pando in general in terms of your business model. And for revenue, are you looking for primarily revenue from a subscription service, or are you looking like it's 25 cents per kilowatt hour from the utility and we're charging you 26 or whatever? Or because there's going to be the installation costs, I'm hoping or thinking are going to be mostly offset by grants or that sort of thing. But in terms of your ongoing business costs and revenue, are you primarily a subscription base or?
Yeah, so there's actually two business models that we operate under, and it's more due to the fact that the difference between apartments and HOAs. So the first one is it is a subscription fee. It's roughly $20 a month. On the other side of that is a kilowatt hour markup between 5 and 8 cents, depending on the property. And so when you're looking at it from that perspective, the apartments typically just want to do actually do the subscription fee. Surprisingly enough, they'll just pay that themselves, and they'll either add it somewhere into the rent or somewhere else. It'll get paid back to them in some way. And then when you're talking about the HOA to cover our costs, they just mark up the cost per the kilowatt hour a little bit. And usually most people see that as sort of a convenience charge. It's just easier to charge at my house and have to find a supercharger somewhere.
Want to make sure I hit Scott's question as we hit business models a little bit on Pando's ability to scale. There would seem to be more demand than one company's ability to meet. What keeps another company from rolling out this kind of outlet-based solution?
Absolutely nothing. That's one of the problems with the NEMA standard is that it's a standard and anybody can use it. But that's okay. First of all, we are all really big proponents of the electric vehicle revolution, and we want to make sure that people have the ability to charge at home. And if somebody's going to copy our great idea, please do it. Roll this out to more people. Get more people driving EVs. I think there right now is plenty of room for a lot of competitors to win, and then we can start to figure out how we coalesce into the future. But that's a long way down the road. This market is so wide open right now. There's no reason to worry about any kind of stepping on people's toes.
And just speaking to that, there's a huge need beyond MFDs and the kind of apartment home charging scenario for hotels. We touched a little bit on so big in that gap in the market. There's obviously some installations gone in where you've got 2 handles, 4 handles maybe, but it's becoming an increasing problem now that you're not going to get that handle unless you arrive bang on check-in at 3 p.m. It's probably gone by 6, 7 p.m. and most of us arrive much later at night. This if you're talking as you did about this installation with 90 plus plugs, that's kind of a solution. But is the hotel business different enough to kind of warrant this as a solution, or is just you haven't reached that far into the market yet?
We haven't reached that far into the market yet, but we are starting to get a lot of interest from hotels. So they are seeing that need as well. I think they're also, because they're in the service industry, they want to make sure that guests come and are happy. Great way to make someone unhappy is to show up, say you have EV charging and they show up and they can't use the charger the whole time. So they're also looking at this as some kind of a solution to actually help add more charging stations than they had before.
I mean, also it's very rare that anybody at the hotel on site when you check in knows how to, if they know the chargers are there at all. I'm sure we've all heard, what's an EV charger? Or is it the plug that's in my, plugging in my laptop at the moment? There's plenty of people, that probably out in the hospitality sector say that's great. I want to add that amenity, but I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to have to repair it every week or every 2 months or whatever it is. This seems to be a much lower lift on that side than the kind of bells and whistles, but also going down every couple of months.
100%. I think the biggest thing that we did was add simplicity in. The whole point of these chargers are supposed to be simple. It's just a plug. I don't want people to go out and say, oh, I need this fancy charging station that has all these features and add-ons. And like, what EV drivers really need is access to energy, and that's it. So however you're going to provide that to them, you should do it. But I don't think they should start adding in all these layers of complexity, because that's where you start getting failure points.
And if I can just ask about that complexity comment, I was thinking if I was a landlord, one thing I might want to do for my renters, or if I was a building operator of a condo or something like that. I work in downtown Charlotte, where there's a lot of high-rise multi-tenant buildings with concrete garages attached. Is instead of doing a cost per kilowatt hour or cost for energy delivered, I would just want to include it into the rent. And if there's assigned spaces for everyone and all spaces have a charger, do you, as you sign your lease, do you want me to enable your charger, yes or no? At which point it's like a dryer outlet and you have full access to it. And I'm not really going to charge you, nickel and dime you to death. I'll just charge you a flat rate and be done with it. That way you always have, you don't have to worry about an app failure or lack of cell signal or anything like that. You just show up, you plug in, and off you go. And because it's an assigned space, you don't have to worry about someone else showing up and potentially using it instead. Because there's cameras in those garages and whatnot. So anyway, I was just wondering if that was something that you have seen customers of yours consider, the subscription cost and not going to the per kilowatt, and then just doing a flat rate with their end users.
Yeah, so we have seen people do flat rates before. They still, the property still pays us the monthlies, or they have like a yearly fee. In those situations, and then yes, they do just add it on to their existing system. So we have built an API so that they can bring it into a Butterfly or whatever system that they're using. So if they have their own app, they can just have it through the app, and they can see, and they can just hit a button and turn on the charger, and then they just start using that as normal. So yeah, we've kind of thought that one through, because we do realize that there's a lot of varied scenarios here that we're not going to be able to account for, so we might as well just make it as open as we can.
Yeah, so like a parking lot that's wide open in the kind of like a common space, you probably want to have those locked down with an app. But if it was like inside of a concrete high rise that has assigned spaces with cameras, it's probably a different environment, as you say. So each one is a different use case. So interesting. Yeah.
A few more questions from the crowd here, and then I'll pass over to Eric. They are kind of related to the software side and specific use cases, so we can address them in order. Your traveler asks, is the OCPP native or provided by the cloud?
Native. We don't want anything to be reliant on the cloud, just because of additional failure. Like, it's another failure point.
Okay, awesome. And then Big Barney, are you supporting off-peak rates, or is that something that the user will need to do through the vehicle?
We do support off-peak rates. That's something that you program into the backend system, so we get an understanding of what the utility bill looks like, and we program that in. There's 2 ways to do it right now. We either have access through a utility API that just pulls it real time, or we have them, send us a copy of their bill, and we can just manually code it in.
Good. And similar timing kind of issue, any support for scheduled departure on the system?
On our system, no. So we typically want to keep that with the car. So a lot of the cars already have that ability to do that, and we don't want to have this mix and match stuff. So if people wanted to schedule departure time, they can do that through the vehicle app. And we don't need to create any additional complexities there.
Okay. Okay, Eric, over to you.
Well, I mean, other than my question about running a crypto miner off of Walter's open socket, what's the best app or pathway or gateway? So, and maybe you don't have any of these sites open yet, but say you install one at a mall that is open to the public. Like what's the best gateway for consumers to find these open locations versus maybe like semi-restricted if like you have to be a hotel guest versus maybe closed? I know PlugShare is a good resource that a lot of people rely on. But is there a way to look specifically for Pando and say, I'm planning out a vacation and I want to find out some hotels that have charging and looking for your services as an option?
So to date, no. I would say 100% of our operations are all in restricted locations. So it's not like something that the public could get easily access to.
Okay. But yeah, maybe just when they're public,
I
on PlugShare and some other resources. So yeah, we can find
100%. Yeah, you're totally right there. It's something that I honestly hadn't considered, but you're right. Like as we grow and these start to show up in places that are more public, that would be an added benefit that we will definitely look into.
Mm-hmm.
That brings us on to the future nicely. I mean, I think I mentioned the Marquee Vlogs talk with you, but you also did some time with Chase at Grid Connections, who we love and have had on. And in that conversation, you were starting to talk about new products and some of the lines that you might get into. That was about 4 or 5 months ago. So I don't know if you come further down or if this is all 2025 stuff that I should stop asking about, but anything you can give us on future kind of increments and the kind of areas you might be exploring.
Yeah, so we did roll out some new feature sets onto our Pando device. So one of the bigger ones is, the tap and charge is now there. OCPP is obviously now there. There is no connectivity required. That's another big one that we've recently added in. And then we're about to roll out GFCI breakers built into the device. So there's like an extra added safety feature.
And actually, I think someone in the comment mentioned something, and maybe this is another potential business opportunity for you. But what about upgrading RV parks? Because it seems like what you're offering is very much in line with, the services that are already offered at RV parks, but just maybe an upgrade or a removal of a major headache. I know that I've talked to RV park owners and hosts before.
Yes, and I have pursued this. So if anyone has a contact at KOA or one of these RV parks, please send them out. I've been banging on doors as much as I can because it is an ideal use case for this type of device.
Yeah, at KOA last time I visited one was still reviewing. Said they had some kind of EV policy coming down the pike, but this was 2 years ago, and I haven't heard anything since. So sounds like it's something that's long overdue.
I think I heard that 6 years ago.
Yeah, you've been backwards adventuring longer than I have. So, yeah. Okay, let's finish. I want to be respectful of your time, Joseph, and not go too long here, but let's see, just some comments. Leonard says, thinks you guys will get a ton of interest given the low cost of the equipment. Absolutely huge. And kind of related, Crazy Postman gives us the other end of the spectrum. EV crime, charge points, selling level 3 commercial charges for 8,000 plus. That sounds on the low side for me.
Yeah.
But it's all for a nice power graph, so it's well worth it, I'm sure. And then one final question from Scott Owens. Just installing outlets doesn't account for the load balancing that Pando does, correct? Adding 200 outlets to a garage would have to have the ability to feed all 250 amps at once. I'll leave that with you, Joseph.
No, so that's actually correct. There's load balancing that's going on. So they're lowering their charge rate based on the number of chargers that are plugged in. So it goes back to that idea of the Pando forest. Each one of the chargers knows how much energy is available to all of them. And so once they start getting used up, it starts saying, okay, well, now I have this much and this much and this much, and now I have none left. And so then now we go into a queuing system. And now we're trying to roll people on and off the line as fast as we can. So that's kind of how that's working.
Gotcha. I think we've hit all the questions there. Anything else from you, Walter? I know you had a list. Long as your arm.
No, I actually got through all of mine. The last one was the one about the landlord who wanted to do a flat rate, and I didn't think that Eric was going to be showing up with this crypto mining kit. That was a blind spot there.
Well, yeah. My other one was don't share a Pando with the Hummer EV, right? Just
oh yeah, no,
not if they got there first.
Like it's going to fit in any of these spaces anyway. Awesome. Well, let's give folks the information where they can go. So you have pandoelectric.com is a great place to find out everything about the system and the kind of potential markets. As I mentioned, I will link down in the description the videos with Patrick and Liv from Marquee Vlog. Ford and Marquee Vlog. They're as close to Ford as they need to be now anyway. So that's a great video to watch. And then also one with Grid Connections. The interview they did with Chase is really kind of enlightening on the system and potential for the future. We're going to probably chat EVs for the next 10-20 minutes. You're welcome to stay with us, or if you need to drop off, please do, because I know it's a long evening. Totally
I would love to have stayed, but I've been away from work for too long.
There you go. Yeah, I can see you ready to go. Well, thank you so much for joining us. As I say, pandoelectric.com. Really appreciate the insights there, and we'll look forward to seeing you grow as we head into the new year.
Exciting.
Absolutely, yeah. Pleasure being here, guys. Cheers.
Thanks so much. Have a good one. Okay, chaps, it's the rare occasion where we have a little bit of time to discuss the 100 different topics. Do you want to stay on? Well, we can open this to the crowd for sure, and anyone who has any topics that you'd like to hit, drop them in the chat. Rare opportunity to pick our brains on whatever you want. Anything you guys want to bring up quickly before we go back to the crowd?
The seventh inning stretch.
Yeah, I mean, we can stop early. That would be unheard of, but we have the time slot, so. Well, here's one from RLH Marines before we sign off. What can you guys say about GM's announcement of its new prismatic battery products with partner LG Solutions? Eric, that's right in your...
So I can't say anything. I don't have any insider information, but I would say that one of my biggest criticisms of their NMC 100 plus amp hour pouch cells is they don't really support the faster charging rates. They're pretty much, it looks like a 2C charging rate cell, which is somewhat limiting. Prismatic cells open the option for faster charging, maybe more novel packaging. And then the other thing is too, the thing that screams to me is they recently announced that the Chevrolet Bolt EV would be their next new unveiled released EV. And that's supposed to be with LFP, and LFP and prismatic kind of go together like peanut butter and jelly. So that would be maybe my assumption is the prismatic cells are either designed for faster charging, if they're using the nickel-based chemistry, or they're going to be designed for their lower cost entry-level models like the Bolt EV if it's using LFP. That would be my assumption, but I'm going to keep my eyes and ears open.
That could be huge with the Bolt coming in with LFP, right? I mean, we're looking at needing to get these prices down. Obviously, the Equinox EVs come in with a really compelling price point, but a lot of the headlines around that were on the incentives, which may well go away. Although I think it's a compelling product and it's right at the price that they've found. But I mean, the Bolt is kind of this. It's gone unmentioned for a long time now. But it's one of those that is looming on the horizon. Like it could be back into the 25 to 30K with the LFP packs, the streamlines that they're making with, the design there. It just seems like that could be one of those to unlock the affordable EV market from the new buyer's perspective, at least.
Yeah, I mean, there were only a few things that they really, especially once you got to that latest generation of Bolt EV, there were really only a few things that they needed to adjust to make it competent in the current market. And the primary one of those was charging. So if they can keep the cost down and improve the charging speeds, similar efficiency, similar range, it's kind of the car that we need right now, if I'm being honest. So
I'm ready for it, although I may need a bigger car now. Let's see. Going back to Scott, we will circle back to the Rivian Adventure Network. Is this going to be a slow, grueling rollout like Tesla? Well, they're already behind schedule if you talk about the coverage. You know, they were supposed to have 600. I don't know if I can't remember if it was 600 chargers or locations, but it was certainly going to be much larger than it is, and they don't have the money to burn on, you know, just blowing out a massive network nationwide. But I think this will be all at once. I think we're going to be ready to roll here next week.
Yeah, I don't think he was. I think he was referring to like a piecemeal per OEM inclusion, but I agree. I think it's just going to be like flip a switch.
Yeah, software based now, right? We're not talking about a connector issue at all.
Yeah, the standard. Yeah, unlike Tesla that actually needed to update their hardware to actually be the CCS standard. Rivian, it's already there, so it should be as simple as here's an app, sign up, put your payment information in, and start charging.
Yeah, there's no credit card readers on them, so that's going to be a piece that they don't have to deal with. What else am I thinking? Oh, the question that got asked the most, to me at least, was are they 800 volt, capable, and they're rated up or spec'd up to 920 volts, so we shouldn't have any problems on that. Obviously, I'm invested in that, being hoping that the charging times kind of match up to what I'm getting in the Ioniq 5 on other similar 1,000 volt capable dispensers and power cabinets. I don't see any big problems with the rollout.
Yeah, and much like Tesla, just for people to be aware, it does appear like they have an average power per stall that's slightly lower than the other public charging providers, which is why when you see 6 Rivians there at one time and all the stall, they're all only charging at like 90 to 100 kilowatt, because that's the power limitation of the site. So being able to mix in some slower charging EVs, smaller battery EVs, that might just be a net benefit for their network anyway. So,
yeah. I mean, I'd be fascinated to see a site with 6 Rivians, because if I see one, it's a good day. So yeah, I don't see any downsides to it. The only thing is obviously it's not a huge network, but again, we're adding that 100 extra stations, better part of. Walter's got Pilot Flying J in the background there. They just passed 100. It's not about now any one individual network. It's about everybody piling in to kind of all hands to the pump. And on that subject, Anthony over in Seattle, we should take a moment to credit Kyle at Out of Spec and the various trips they've done back and forth across the country on the CCS1 network. No issues really, just cars, performing as cars can, so they can really test the models now. Same for myself, going across. I mean, we've been saying this for a while, Eric, although I know it's individual kind of anecdotal stuff, but people are more and more able to do this, and it's not nearly as hard as if people have thought in the past.
Yeah, I saw a post-mortem on the I-90 Surge video collection, and one of the drivers was Tesla centric, and she was very surprised that she was even able to do a cross-country on a CCS car. That was a bit of a surprise, and there was little to no issue. In fact, they were in the winning car in the Taycan, and they just breezed on through and coasted into where was it, Boston or New York that they landed?
They came in here,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people have been doing it, to be fair, for years. So it's always the capability and the locations have been there. I think if you go back to whatever it was, 21 or 22, when they did the charge across America, that that Ryan, I think from the Kilowatts did, there were much more of the futzing around with stations, couldn't get a payment reader to work, derated Electrify America, all that kind of stuff. But to the original point, it was only ever Electrify America, so you didn't have a choice, you didn't have a second option there. And maybe they've upped their game, in response to criticism and other networks coming up. But at the same time, there are other options there now. It's as we go forward into this next phase. If you don't want to go to Electrify America for whatever reason, even if it's just past kind of, being put off, there's going to be more alternatives. In many of these places, you're going to have a second, third, fourth option. And Eric, you've been seeing that for years here.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, but even on that whole I-90 surge, that was someone had mentioned, because I made the bold claim that I could beat the old Model S in my Bolt EV, which I stand by. But they forget that route is covered also by slower than 150 kilowatt chargers. So even if you're only looking, and this has been my issue for a long time, is even on these cross country routes, I feel like people have been so hyper focused on Electrify America that they forgot that there are already regional or local charging providers and networks that are supporting these routes. Sometimes slower chargers, but sometimes faster chargers. But yeah, that race kind of solidified the whole. At this point, we're now down to nitpicking about the public charging sites. Oh, it's a mile off the freeway because it's at a Walmart. Okay, or oh, I'm only getting 150 kilowatt when I was hoping to get 250, right? So we're getting to the point of nitpicking now, where I think that's a good sign. And then to your point, Steve, there's just a whole lot more that's joining the fray. So it's if you have a network that works for you, you like the sites, you're more than likely going to have an option to charge. So,
and Nevi is starting to fill in some gaps as well that we've talked about. I did a video updating on that for November. A bunch of surges there. One in Texas going live, which is a kind of harbinger of things to come. Them starting to fill gaps down there. Leonard points out Tesla lost a Nevi award in Oklahoma in favor of EVgo. Yeah, it's 3 sites. Something about Tesla not being able to meet the requirements of Nevi, although I think those will start to shift as we talk about J3400 being standardized. But yeah, again, kind of EVgo taking the place. They were the second.
Like EVgo, like the company EVgo?
Yep.
That must be their first Nevi. I didn't even know they were submitting applications for Nevi.
Yeah, they haven't won a whole bunch. They do have some typically in when they start to move away from travel corridors or where the travel corridor aligns with a metro area. EVgo's team seems to be better at finding retail spaces, malls, that kind of thing. But yeah, EVgo was the second placed bidder in those 3 sites in Oklahoma. So they slipped in where Tesla lost out, presumably for some kind of standard, or maybe they just decided that the voltage limitation was a problem.
Yeah, that was the other big news that didn't hit our radars, but it just announced today that they passed their 2000th stall with their GM partnership and getting ready to finish that up to, I think it's 2,800 stalls in total, including the flagship locations coming on next year.
Lots of questions coming in here. We'll probably still bump up against time, but let's keep it going. Let's see. Walter, you're probably best placed for this. Anyone heard more about Iona? Was hoping we'd hear about new PIPs, permits, construction from them. So I guess we only have what we previously reported, but maybe you're better placed to let us know what's going on with them.
West of Springfield, Ohio, there's another PIP found.
So that's not the one that's actually in Springfield?
Correct. It's it's north of Dayton. There's a new PIP. Okay. I forgot the name of the town, but there is a new one.
Okay, so that's 11 now?
I forgot the number. That would be the 6th one spotted under construction.
Okay, awesome. Well, I mean, it's such early days that anything that is opened or starts to come up on the radar for them.
Yeah, I suspect with what I'm catching the vibe from Anna, there's a ton more out there that are.
Yeah, it's weird that we haven't
getting built.
Ohio seems to be the place to look at the moment.
Yeah, it's a big, or anything with the word sheets on it also is likely got cabinets going in the ground.
Andy asks, any thoughts on the ChargeX Consortium's announcement of universal plug and charge standard testing starting
Yeah.
next year?
I had a really hard time digesting what I was reading and what they were actually referring to in practicality. I mean, it sounds great where we don't need apps anymore and we just plug in and it automatically deducts from a given account that is peered with all the other CPOs, if I understand correctly. So plug and charge universally available and no more apps. I mean, that sounds too good to be true.
Yeah, it sounds like a credit card.
Yeah.
It sounded like they were just formalizing what had been going on for the last, what had been promised. I mean, Electrify America talked about this back in 2019 with Hubject and the partnership there. So this stuff's all been worked on in the background. I think this might just be some government fuel on the fire and standardizing that plug and charge ISO 15118 will be the way that this needs to be.
I didn't see 15118. I did see mention of certificates, so I was assuming 15.11.8. But it wasn't explicitly called out, so I guess so. So again, I had a hard time digesting exactly what I was reading.
Yeah, the bridging to the payment is what I would always be concerned about, is because once you stop looking at your money, funny things can happen to it. So
right, yeah, some CPOs put big holds, some don't.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're running up against time here. I don't want to unpack any big conversations that we'll have to start a new podcast for. I think just to kind of cap it off with the Rivian Adventure Network, Scott points out the Joshua Tree location appears to be the new chargers, so that may have been where his wonder on, will they have to wait for these other locations to open? I really don't think so. I think they're just going to open it up. The delay has been interoperability and making sure that they've tested all the models that are out there now, but I think it's going to go. I don't see that they would just open Joshua Tree and then say, oh, by the way, the others aren't available. So I think we're good there. Lots of comments after that. I'm sorry if I missed any. We have to kind of start to wind it down now. But thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate all the questions that were there for Joseph. Good to get those in and get them answered on the spot there. I should call out Mr. Eric Way and News Coolum, who you got 2 road trip videos quite recently, right? You actually, I think in the last week or 10 days, you've had a couple of different ones out there. So
road trips or shopping?
Well, I count them as whenever you're going to multiple chargers, I'm saying that's a road trip, sir.
Yeah.
But no, it's awesome. And they've really been good for me to just kind of watch in the background, and I have to remember to comment though. That's my only problem. I kind of watch them and track along with you, but then I need to track back to think what the questions I had were. So you see a comment from me 3 days later after I've watched it. That's what's going on there.
Thank you. Yeah.
And then Mr. Walter Schultze at the Network Architect channel. Those are weekly updates at the very least, more likely every few days. Every time one pops up in my feed, I'm hoping that I'm not in the car because I want to watch it right away, but if I am, usually I can stop 5-10 minutes later, and those are so succinct and well done that it's easy to watch them in the car or wherever you're traveling. So definitely recommend going over, checking out the latest, and you'll know all there is to know about DC fast charging progress.
Yeah, I got one in the hopper called the Trump effect getting ready to drop.
Oh, that should be pretty neutral.
Right? I like to touch the third rail.
Yeah, I highly doubt there'll be any controversy there.
Well, yeah, why not January 20th? Just save the date.
I don't know. I think I'd do it on January 6th or 5th, whatever it was.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Well, we don't get political, so that's right at the end. Thank you everybody for watching. We will be back in, I think it's on 2 weeks time. So what is that? December the 18th for our end of year party, most likely. So bring your beverages and whatever you like to snack on, and we'll just do round the table, probably a big open chat for as long as we can all stay awake. And yeah, that's about it. Cheers, everybody. Oh, wait, no. Cheers, nerds.
Oh.
It's all right.